says, "Blessed is the man that endures temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to them that love him." Now, when I do, when I'm studying the Bible, I have a tendency to take the words. I mean, we can look at these words and know what they mean pretty much. But, if we would take them and go deeper and see what these words really mean and what the Bible says. And one of the references I use is the Webster 1828, I think that's what it is. I can't remember the year. I put it down. Yeah, 1828, to define some of these words. So let me write down. So I'm going to first go with, blessed is the man. Okay. And this. And so I wanted to look up what blessed means. Now we all know, we think, oh, God blesses us. And we feel that it's a gift and generosity and love. But the dictionary says it is to make us happy or prosperous. So prosperous is what we usually think. But when it said happy, it made me think, well, how can I be happy? Or, how is the man happy when he endures temptation? We have to think that. And so, we also look at what does endureth mean. So endureth means to continue in the same state of something, or without perishing or suffering, or complete ruin or destruction. So if we're continuing to do something, we're doing okay and we're blessed for it. But when we look at temptation, that's what, I thought, I'm like, what does that really mean? How can we be blessed and be in a temptation? Because for me, when I'm tempted, I'm not feeling too happy. I don't know about any of you. I'm feeling, not the best. But in temptation means to entice to evil by arguments or by flattery or by offer of a personal gain. Now, I also thought, well, not only temptation, what about trials? Does trials in the same category as temptations? And that's when I looked up the word trial. It means the state of being tried, afflictions, or temptations that exercise and prove the graces or virtues of men. So we can say that temptation and trials are pretty much equal, I would say, even though it doesn't really say it, but it does. We can think that in that line. Now, I also started thinking in this, when I look at words, I always look at this word right here. And I know most people that are teachers know what this word is. It's a linking verb. And so for people that don't know what a linking verb is, I'm sure most of you do, it links the noun to either renaming it or describing it. So when I was looking at this, I'm kind of setting down a foundation just so you guys know that, so we can understand what this really means. But blessed isn't a noun. It isn't. And I believe in their poeticness in the King James, they switched these two. So if we rewrite it and say, the man is blessed when he endureth temptation. Now we can understand why. Okay, do you see how I switched it and made it that way? So we want to, we're enduring it, or we're describing the man as he endures the temptation. Okay? Let me go through this. But when I was also reading this, I was wondering, like I said, I was wondering why we're happy. And so I asked myself two questions. What is temptation and trials? And where does it come from? Because we really have to be really seriously thinking about that. And so, first of all, I thought, well, does temptations come from God? We know he doesn't, because if we turn to James 1:13, which is the next verse down, it says, "Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man." So God doesn't tempt us. But there's still that question, where does it come from? So I continue down the verses to 14 and 15. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed. When lust has conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. So that's where our temptations come from, is our own desire to acquire something, to go forth and conquer, I guess, basically. My words. So, but I also looked at the word lust in that verse. We know that lust, well, in my thinking, lust is sexual. And that's what most people think is a sexual desire, because that's how we always obtain it to be. But if we look a little deeper, it can mean something different. It can be the lust of money, which we also know that. It can also be the lust of food, the lust of entertainment and books, TVs, radio, and anything else. We could be a lust of slandering somebody. These are all lusts. These are desires to do that. And what it does, it brings forth sin. So, but in Proverbs 4:23, it says, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. And I want to turn to Matthew 15, 17 through 20. So chapter 15, 17 through 20. And so what I'm saying, lust, let me tell you the definition of lust. It's to have a carnal desire, a desire to eagerly the gratification of a carnal appetite. So when I was saying all those examples, that is pretty much lust in an example. So Matthew chapter 15, 17 through 20. Now this is Jesus commenting. He says, do not ye yet understand that whatsoever you enters in the mouth goes unto the belly, and is cast into the draught? But those things which proceeded out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies, and these are the things which defile a man. Now, Jesus to me seems to have summed up what lust is in my words. And, I just kind of want to go a little bit deeper in that and to see what these words kind of mean. Okay? So when we see evil thoughts, what does that mean? Somebody that's talking bad about somebody, right? Yeah, you're thinking about it. You're pondering about it. What am I doing? The book, I think I would have caught on to it. You're thinking bad thoughts of the person. You're like, oh, that person is wearing such a horrible outfit. Or, why did they do that? Or, all those things. But, actually when I was in there doing Sabbath school with Jacob, it came to my mind to look up the 10 Commandments and what do they say about these words that Jesus wrote. So you guys won't have it, but the first one would be page 305 and Patriarchs and Prophets. Okay, and I believe it's 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth paragraph. Read it. This to me, oh wait, no, that's not the right one. I'm sorry. I will get to that one. I'm sorry. It's page 309. Sorry, Jerry, I know you wrote the notes. And it's the second paragraph. Okay, now this command is, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Now, we can think of that as evil thoughts and false witness summed up together when I read this. Okay? False speaking in any manner, ever attempt or purpose to deceive our neighbor is here included. Intention to deceive is what constitutes falsehood. by a glance of the eye, a motion of the hand, an expression of the countenance, a falsehood may be told affectionately as by words. All intentional overstatement, every hint of insinuation calculated to convey an enormous or exaggerated impression, even though the statement of the facts in such a manner as to mislead, is falsehood. This precept forbids every effort to injure our neighbor's reputation by misrepresentation or evil surmising, by slandering or tale-bearing, even the intentional suppressing of truth by which injury may result to others is a violation of the 9th commandment. Now, that to me sums up evil thoughts and false witnessing, which false witnessing is lying, and evil thoughts I've already discussed. Now, if we also look at the words murders, we always think of murder as somebody going out and killing somebody and doing that thing, or committing suicide. That's murder, technically. But also, in the spiritual way, it's a murder towards God if we go, if we don't do what he asked, which I can't explain it as good as Ellen White can, with her words. So let me read them. It's on page 308, which is a page right beside it. All acts of injustice that tend to shorten life, the spirit of hatred and revenge, or the indulgence of any passion that leads to injurious acts towards others, or causes even to wish them harm. For whoso hateth his brother is a murderer. A selfish neglect of caring for the needy or suffering, all self-indulgence or unnecessary deprivation or excessive labor that tends to injure health, all these are to a greater or less degree violation of the 6th commandment. That's wow, because we just think of it as killing, but Jesus, there's a lot more to it than just murdering somebody in cold blood. Now, I want to also look at, obviously we know what theft is. That's stealing. That's something that let me see here. She has a thing about adultery. So let me explain here. And I'm just kind of going through these so then we understand what's not going to make us happy when we endure temptation. So when we're going through all these temptations and these things kind of pop up to us, we can say, this is not going to make us happy when we're seeing this arise in our life. That's why I'm kind of presenting this to you guys so you can understand that. Thou shalt not commit adultery. This commandment forbids not only the acts of impurity, but the sensational thoughts and desires or any practice that tends to excite them. Purity is demand not only in the outward life, but in the secret intents and emotions of the heart. Christ, who taught the far-reaching obligations of the law of God, declared the evil thought or look as to be truly sin, as an unlawful deed. Now, where was that again? I'm sorry, it's right below it. It's page 308. So I'm basically doing 308, 309, and if I come back to that one, 305, and all in the law given to Israel and patriarchs and prophets. So, but when fornication can also fall underneath adulteries. But when I looked up fornication, I was kind of shocked because it states about having an affair, basically, is what it is. But down below, it basically said it's an idolatry. If you worship an idol, you're committing adultery. I remember listening to Bill Lehman's sermon the one time, and I'm sure some of you guys have probably listened to it, where he made the mention that we commit adultery every single time we sin against Christ. And I was just like, wow, really? Because he is our groom, he's our bridegroom, and we are the bride. And so that is just a spiritual lesson that we can learn, that every time we sin, we're committing adultery. So we think, oh, just a person to person. But it really is human to God when we do certain things like that. And these things are very important to us. At least to me it is. And I'm sure you guys feel the same way. It's my bookmark. Let's see here. Blasphemy, which we know that it is speaking evil against God. But it also could be speaking evil against our neighbors, which is pretty much the same thing as bearing false witness. And I believe, the one I was going to have 3 out of 5. I'm sorry, I wanted to do the quote on 305 too. You'll have to kind of forgive me, I'm kind of talking, which would go against with the fornication, with the adultery of, committing against Christ. So let's read what she says. A man is forbidden to give any other object the first place in his affection or his service. Whatever we cherish that tends to lessen our love for God or to interfere with the service due him or that do we make a God. So that's pretty much what I said with being adultery, with fornication, with us, going against God by loving our sin. Okay? So those are the things. There. Now, these lusts that I have talked about, what does it do? It draws our heart away from God. And honestly, it just doesn't make me happy. To some people, it might, because they don't know any different. But for me, it gives me heartache and despair. And I feel lost. And so I was glad to see God show me those things in that. But, I continue to ask myself questions of, why do we go through temptations? Because we feel, okay, well, we're with God. And new beginners feel this way. I felt this way when I first started being a Christian. I thought, okay, smooth sailing, no big deal. God's going to protect me all the way. And yeah, that doesn't work so hard. I've been through so many things, and my family knows that. And they've been through so many things. I mean, I kind of give a little bit of an example. When we moved out to where we are now, we sold our house, bought some land, and pitched a tent. That's how we lived for 2.5 weeks. And the day that we set foot on that property, the day it rained. And it rained for 2.5 weeks. 2.5 weeks. And it wasn't just a little sprinkle. It was like what we had this last Wednesday or Thursday. It was that kind of rain. And it rained. And it rained. And I'm just like, I can do this. I'm out in the country. I can do this. I can endure this. I can endure. I'm going. Well, the last day of that rain, the last 2.5 weeks, that last day, a horrible storm came. And I remember that because I was in town at the library. Jeremy calls me and he's just like, Carrie, there's a bad storm coming and it's coming fast. And I'm like, well, I'm not home. I can't really go. And he's like, we just need to go. And I said, okay. He's like, I'm leaving work. I'll be right behind you. And I said, fine. So I'm driving and I'm looking back in the back mirror and you could see that storm coming. And I was just like, I don't think we're going to make it. And as soon as we topped the hill, it just let loose. And of course, we not only had a tent, we had a, well, no, it wasn't we didn't have the shed yet. That came after this. We had a camper. A very nasty camper, but nonetheless, it was a camper. And it had an awning. And of course, we knew with a storm, the awning would go gone. So we were in that rush to buckle everything down. And I think it was it you, Seer? I jumped out and I'm trying to hold this awning. And Seer's trying to hold the awning with me. It was hailing, it was bombarding. And of course, Jacob's little, so he's in there. And I finally just said to Seer, I was like, let it go. I was like, we can't hold it back. So we let it go. As soon as we let it go, that awning went poof, gone. And we went in there and I'm sitting there going, okay, I can handle this. I can handle this trial. No big deal. No big deal. Of course, Jeremy didn't arrive because on the way, he was going up the hill. A tree fell down, if I remember right, and he almost hit it. And so he had to backtrack and all that other stuff. But as the story goes, when the storm was all done, we walked out, everything was pretty much destroyed. The tent was leveled because I told Abby to level it. If I remember, I told her to pull out the tents because it was just blowing. It was going to blow it away. And so everything was just leveled. And when Abby went into the tent, there was about an inch of water in that tent. was devastating. I mean, devastating. Because we had our mattresses in there, brand new mattresses. We thought, oh, we'll sleep on our mattresses. We're camping for a little while. We want to be comfortable. Brand new mattresses, ruined. What? I know. Everything was ruined. Everything was. I can't really describe it. I have pictures of it, but anyhow, it was horrible. And I was so tempted right then and there to say, I've had it. I'm done. I don't care about this life of country living. I just want to go back to my nice little home that has a roof. But then I thought, no, I'm here. God put me here for a reason. It's fate. It really is fate. And so, that heartache was a turning point for me. And that's why I wondered why, people go through heartaches and stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to share that story. But even though you go through heartaches, it still comes out, okay? And of course, we have a house now. But the great thing out of that story is that I had my Bible in the tent. The Bible wasn't even wet. Except when we pulled it out, the little drops of rain hit it. Can you believe that? And he saved my Bible. I was like, yay! Because that could have been seriously destroyed with an inch of rain. Anyhow, side note of, going through trials and triumph things. So, all right, let's go to Job 5:17. Sorry, I didn't mean to go off track, but it's a nice testimony to let you know that when you go through all your trials and temptations, there's always tomorrow, no matter what. We do. Okay, it's my Job. I know what Job is. So chapter 5, verse 17. All right. So behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. Therefore despise not thou chastening of the Almighty. Now, when I looked at that verse, what was the thing that you guys noticed? And the same as in James. Happy. Blessed means happy. So it pretty much says the same thing. Happy is the man whom God correcteth. But it gives us a little more detail of why we're going through our temptations and trials. It's because God wants to correct us. He wants us to be better. And so we should not despise it. He doesn't want to leave us at our level. He wants to take us to the perfection level. And it always astonished me when people hear just like, oh, I'll never be perfect. No, you will be if you allow God to change you. And it says right there, if you allow God to correct you, you will be happy. I'm happy when he corrects me because then I'm not stuck in that same lustful attitude that we've described. I'm somebody different. I want to be like Jesus, honestly. I want to be like him that looks at somebody and just has those sympathy eyes and say, oh, how I want to help you. He doesn't care their past or their future or whatever. He just wants to help them. And that's who, I like to be. So, now I also looked up the word correct. So, when I was looking at this, I want to know what he means by corrected me, And so when I looked up the word, it says to make right and to remove faults or errors or to discipline. That's what correcting means. And, that's pretty much what he does. He does it out of love, never out of anger, of course. So I also decided to go to Psalms 94, so chapter 94, 12, and 13 in Psalms. And when I read this, it seems to me that it is giving more detail about James and about Job. So God builds up on his words so we can understand them. At least to me it does. There. Okay, it says, blessed is the man whom thou chastise, O Lord, and teachest him out of thy law, which is the same thing as what Job just said, that thou mayest give him rest from the days of adversary until the adversary. So that is basically saying the same thing as James and Job, but he gives a little bit more details. And when he gave the detail of adversary, that's what I noticed the most, that it was just a little different than those other ones. But what is adversary? So I looked that word up to see what that word means. And it says it's an event or series of events which oppose success or desire, a calamity, distress, or just plainly a state of unhappiness. So when I saw that, I said, okay, God, you want us to be blessed through temptation. And through our temptation, or maybe trials that we fall into, he wants to correct us. And through our correction, he wants to make sure that when we come across this again, our adversaries, when we're through these events or calamities or distress, like I went through with the tent, that I would be happy. Like, this is no big deal. You know, and of course after that happened, you know, it was kind of funny. After all this happened, when we were our tent destroyed and everything else, not only that, but everywhere we stored our food in our pool barn in the other property, mice got into it and ate it all. My mom's like, Carrie, aren't you a bit upset? I'm like, no, not a bit. I just went through something and I came out with faith. I'm not upset at all. And this tells you that when we're corrected, we're not scared of our adversaries. We're not scared of what's going to happen to us. It's going to make us happy. So, I mean, yeah. Okay, so let's go back to, I want to look a little more details in James 1:12. So you have to flip back there. Okay. Where it says, blessed is the man that endures temptation, for when he is tried. So I want to stop there. The little tiny words, for when he is tried, okay, stuck out into my head too. Maybe, or occasionally, it's going to be when. It means it's going to be there for us probably every single day. We're tempted every single day. We know that Satan loves to make us stumble so he can laugh at Jesus. So, but I wanted to look at some people in the Bible that shows us examples of when they go through a temptation and they're tried. What do they do? Okay? Do they allow Jesus to rule their heart? Or do they allow their own pride to ruin or rule their heart, basically? So the first one I thought of course I thought of several. The first one I thought about is Nebuchadnezzar and his story of how he was a very prideful man and he went through many things. And of course, at the very end of his life, he became really prideful and said, well, I'm the one that built Babylon. Look at me, look at me. I did all this. Even though he knew that Daniel said, it wasn't you that built this empire, it was God. God gave it to you. But he thought for himself that he ruled it. Well, what did God do? He chastised him. Did he not? And so he put him basically like an animal on all four, eating grass, not even thinking, very numb, basically, to me, for 7 years. Can you imagine? 7 years. Of course, that's, they say 7 is the perfection number, so obviously he had to go through 7 to be that. But at the end, when finally, it says in Daniel, let me see, Daniel chapter 4, verse 33, it says, thou now that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and give it to whomsoever he will. So finally, Nebuchadnezzar, when he came out of this, he said this and said, I finally know who rules. Not I, but God. And because he decided to choose God instead of his own pride and all these idols, he finally said, and at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes and unto heaven, and my understanding returned unto me, and I blessed the most holy, and praised and honored him that liveth forever. So we can think of when we read Psalms 94:12, when he chastised him with the law, saying, no, pride's not good, that's breaking the 10 Commandments. But he didn't leave him there, did he? He let him have his, correction. But he brought him out. And because of that, he followed God. And he will be in heaven, I'm sure. I couldn't find the quote, and I know I had a friend looking for it. I couldn't find it, but I am sure that Nebuchadnezzar will be there. And how wonderful that would be to actually talk to him and say, what did you go through? What made you change through that trial, that temptation of pride? And we always think of Daniel when we want to ask people, but Nebuchadnezzar would probably be a very cool person to talk to, I think. I also thought, that when we're going through these temptations and trials as Nebuchadnezzar, God doesn't leave us there. He didn't leave Nebuchadnezzar there at all. He chose him to be there, but then he rose them out. And, I found several verses that says why, not why, but, basically why he did that. It's because as many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. That's found in Revelation 3:19. He loves us. He doesn't want to leave us in our temptation and trials. He wants to bring us out of them. He wants to perfect us, basically, through them. And he wants us to have faith to know that he will do these things for us. And so I also looked at 1 Corinthians 10:13, which is a beautiful promise that says, there has no temptation taken you but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are not able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. What a beautiful promise that we can have it. So when we're going through our temptations and we're thinking, I'm not so happy right now, we can go back to this promise and say, he won't give me any more than I don't need. He won't. He loves me. He loves me. If he didn't love me, he wouldn't rebuke me. And so that, to me, is a beautiful promise. And I also looked at, in Desire of Ages, I looked at the story of when the disciples, Jesus got done feeding the 5,000 people. And he basically told the disciples, go, give me some time to myself, because you're trying to make me king, and I don't want to be king on this earth. That's not my job. Basically, he said, go. And he sent the people away, and he went and prayed. And, I'm going to read from the Desire of Ages, of course, and it's on page 380. And it spoke to my heart. I read this so many times of how beautiful Jesus is by not leaving us where we are. For she says, unbelief was taking possession of their minds and hearts, which is the disciples. She's talking about disciples. They're in the boat right now. They're mingling, they're talking, and everything's all nice and peaceful and restful. And they're thinking of what happened that day. Love of honor had blinded them. They knew that Jesus was hated by the Pharisees, and they were eager to see him exalted, as they thought he should be. To be united with the teacher who could work mighty miracles, yet to be reviled, as deceivers, was a trial they could ill endure. There's a temptation going on there, isn't there? Of, they're starting to do all those lustful things that we talked about, the evil thinking, and it's basically surmising it. But if we read down further, it says a violent tempest had been stealing upon them. They're too busy thinking of their trials and what's going on. They didn't even realize it was coming. And they were unprepared for it. It was a sudden contrast, for the day had been perfect. And when the gale struck them, they were afraid. They forget their disaffection, their unbelief, their impatience. Everyone worked to keep the boat from sinking. It was but a short distance by the sea from Bathsheba to the point where they expected to meet Jesus. In an ordinary weather, the journey required but a few hours, but now they were driven farther. And farther from the point they sought, and to the further watch of the mighty, they toiled at their oars. Then the weary man gave himself up for lost. In the storm and darkness, the sea had taught them their own helplessness, and they longed for the presence of their master. Jesus had not forgotten them. The watcher on the shore saw those fear-stricken men battling with the tempest. Not for a moment did he lose sight of his disciples. With the deepest solitude, his eyes followed the storm-tossed boat with a precious burden, for these men were to be the light of the world. And, when I read that, it made me think back here in 1 Corinthians, that even though we're in a temptation, God will not leave us. He is faithful. It says God is faithful. Jesus didn't leave them there, did he? He watched them to see what was going on. But when it came to the point where the temptation was too much, he came to them. And I thought that was beautiful. So when we're thinking about our temptations and trials, we can also think of that, how he was there for them, even when they didn't even know it. So, and I also want to look at another person through this. So we looked at Nebuchadnezzar, and how his temptation from his pride, led to him to sin. But then he corrected himself, or not corrected himself, God corrected him, and he humbled himself, basically. But there's a character in the Bible, and I was talking to Sierra last night that made me think of it, and I thought it was a better character than what I had down. And it was the character of Judas, and how he was complete opposite of Nebuchadnezzar, and how he fell into temptation, but he didn't come out triumph. He wasn't happy. He didn't. It basically, what it says back here with James 1:13-14, when it says, let me go back here and get it because I don't have it memorized, of course, but every man that is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lust and enticed, then when the lust has conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. And that's what happened to Judas. And let me read what Ellen White said about him, because I can't describe it as good as she can, of course, so I usually go with her words, and I'll quote her and make it all good. And I'm going to be quoting from Desire of Ages, obviously, and I guess I can give you the page number after I'm done with each quote. So this one would be 716, paragraph 3. The love of mammon overbalanced his love for Christ. Through becoming the slave of one vice, he gave himself to Satan to be driven to any lengths in sin. That, to me, says temptation. There's his temptation. He loves his money. And then it's on page 720, paragraph 2. At the reproof from Jesus, his very spirit seemed turned to gall. Wounded pride and desire for vengeance broke down the barriers, and the greed so long indulged him, held him in control. So he still had, he's going through his temptation of, turning in Jesus to the Pharisees, but he's so close to going back. But if we read further on page 721, paragraph 1, it says, Judas decided to put the matter to the test. If Jesus really was the Messiah, the people for whom he had done so much would rally about him and would proclaim him king. This would forever settle many minds that were now in uncertainty. Judas would have the credit of having placed the king on David's throne. And this act would secure to him the first position next to Christ in the new kingdom. To me, that still sounds like temptation, because he's thinking, well, I'm going to get some money out of this, and I'm going to have seniority up here in front of everybody else. So what happened to his heart? He subsided to the temptation, did he not? He wanted to basically lust. He lusted for those things. And now he's conceived his sin. For it says on page 645, in Desire of Ages, his heart was crying, how can I give up thee? The constraining power of that love was felt by Judas when the Savior's hands were bathing those soiled feet and wiping them with the towel. Of course, we're talking about the washing of the feet. The heart of Judas thrilled through and through with an impulse then and there to confess his sin. But he would not humble himself. He hardened his heart against repentance, and the old impulses for the woman put aside again controlled him. Judas was now offended at Christ's act in washing the feet of his disciples. If Jesus could so humble himself, he thought he could not be Israel's king. All hope of worldly honor and temporal kingdom was destroyed. Judas was satisfied that there was nothing to be gained by following Christ. After seeing him degrade himself as he thought, he was confirmed in his purpose to disown him and confess himself deceived. Wow, so right there pretty much, his lust went right into sin. Lock, stock, and barrel. He wasn't going back. But then what happens to him when he figures out that Jesus isn't going to present himself as king, and Judas is like, well, I made a big mistake, did I not? It's not what I wanted. And he says, I have sinned. And then on page 722, he makes the comment, or she made the comment, he knew that Judas did not repent when he says, I have sinned, because, we're going through our temptations and trial. We probably might sin, just like Nebuchadnezzar did. He sinned, basically. And Judas sinned too. He had a sin. And it says, his confession was forced from his guilty soul by an awful sense of condemnation and looking forward of judgment. But he felt no deep, heartbreaking grief that he had betrayed the spotless Son of God and denied the Holy One of Israel. Yet Jesus spoke no word of condemnation. He looked pityingly upon Judas and said, for this hour came I into the world. And so it also says, a little farther down, I believe on the same page, and because of Judas' temptation, went to lust and then sin, the result was, that's my writing, I'm sorry. All right, no, it doesn't go. I'm sorry, that's my writing. But basically, that's what it is. His temptation went into sin, and then basically death. I didn't write down what happened to him. Obviously, he hung himself. And what does 1 James says? When he says that your lust will continue to sin, and into sin, death. And how can that make us happy? That can't make me happy, conceiving into sin and then dying. That's why, when God said these words, blessed is the man that endures temptation, he knew that when we go through these temptations, if we actually allow us to, play with them basically, saying, oh, I'm better than that. I can ask for forgiveness. Judas could have asked for forgiveness, and he didn't. And eventually, little by little, it breaks us down. And then we're at our death door. So those are I think to me, was some very good examples of what happens when we go through our temptations and we either choose to follow God and allowing him to correct us, or we choose not to allow God to correct us and die in our sinful ways. Let me see. Sorry, I'm actually ahead of where I need to be. All right, so let's go back to James 1:12. I'm sure, because I don't think we've actually gone any farther. And I'm sorry, guys. I did talk for a long time. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was so long. And read the very last of James 1:12. It says, blessed is the man that endures temptation, and when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord has promised to them that love him. What a beautiful promise, I think. And even Roger even said that. It was a beautiful promise that when we go through these, we can make our choices to either fall to the temptation